Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're situated. Welcome to our monthly Osher Center Grand Rounds. It's a pleasure to have everyone here with us today. Before we get started, by way of introduction for myself, I'm Howard Sesso. I'm the Director of Nutrition and Supplement Research at the Osher Center. As you know, we cover a variety of topics today, and we're excited to have Laura Baker here with us. But before we get into to her presentation, just a few quick announcements. So first and foremost, if you're interested in getting CME credits, check your registration email and also check the chat. At some point, we will put something into the chat for instructions on how to get CME credit. Usually involves including your name and degree. Send that over, and we can make sure we get that processed for you. And then secondly, in terms of announcements, so this is, of course, our monthly installment of the Osher Center Grand Rounds. But separate from that, coming up, we have the inaugural Tai Chi and Qigong in-person conference that's being hosted by the Osher Center. And it's going to be revolving around the idea of whole person health and advancing the integration of mind-body practices in contemporary healthcare. And this is a conference that will be coming up in September, this September 18th and 19th. That will be taking place in Boston. And if you're interested in the conference, please go to the Osher Center website, oshercenter.org, and you can see the links there to register and look at more information about some of the wonderful speakers that will be participating in that. And then secondly, while we have Dr. Baker here with us today, next month, we're on a slightly varied schedule because of it being the middle of May, but our next Grand Round speaker will be on June 6th. Dr. Selma Holden, who is at the New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, and also is the research director at the Riverbird Clinic in Portland, Maine, will be speaking on group ketamine therapy and rediscovering healing in the community. So be on the lookout for announcements from that coming up in the coming week or two, and we look forward to seeing you then as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Laura Baker. So she's been a colleague of mine working on some projects now for, gosh, about 7 or 8 years. It's wonderful to have her here and present. She's a professor of internal medicine, neurology, and public health sciences at Wake Forest, the School of Medicine there, and also is associate director of the NIA-supported Wake Forest Alzheimer's Disease Research Center based in North Carolina as well. She's a longstanding international leader in the area of cognitive aging and lifestyle interventions in particular to protect brain health and also cognitive decline. And that also extends, of course, out to Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. And she's been an investigator of more than 50 clinical studies. More recently, she's been involved in the EXERT study, which is a multi-site clinical trial testing whether regular physical exercise can protect against continued cognitive decline in adults that already have mild cognitive impairment, and now leads US Pointer, which is a large multi-site trial testing the effects of a 2-year multi-domain lifestyle intervention on cognition in adults who are at increased risk for cognitive decline and dementia. She's also, by chance, the co-principal investigator of the Cosmos Mind trial that has looked at the results of both multivitamin supplementation as well as a cocoa extract supplement on cognition over time in an older cohort that I've also been working with her on. I've had the pleasure of collaborating with her on. So without further ado, Laura, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I appreciate your time and joining me today. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my work and maybe our philosophy about how do we help older adults age to the best of their ability, and how do we protect ourselves against cognitive decline. I have no conflicts to declare for this presentation, and my funding for the trials that I will talk about are listed here. So here's what I'd like to talk to you about. Number one, what's our focus? What are we trying to accomplish here in my work? And that is, how do we build resilience against cognitive aging and decline in particular? And you know, right now in 2023, what's the public health priority to build cognitive resilience? I'm going to just touch on that just a bit. And then we're going to turn to some of the work that I've done, and Howie just introduced me and talked about these projects. But I'm going to talk about our work in the domain of physical exercise to protect cognition, both with in cognitively healthy older adults, but also in adults with you know, on the trajectory towards dementia, and those people with mild cognitive impairment. And then I'm going to tell you just a little bit about, because I find it so, I'm so excited about this study, this US Pointer study, which is a multi-domain lifestyle intervention. I don't have results to report, but my point in talking to you today is to show the extensive effort that we have invested in trying to understand how to add more layers of resilience. And we finished enrollment. I'm just going to show you a glance of the incredible resource this will be for all of us at one point. And then finally, we're going to turn to the Cosmos Mind trial and talk about our recent results with nutrient supplementation and how that could, in fact, be yet another layer of protection. Now, these layers I feel are important, that we feel are important in our work. We have no magic bullet now for a single pill that's going to, you know, magically restore cognition or allow us to not age in the way, not show cognitive aging. And so our approach is how can we tool older adults with multiple layers of protection? And that those multiple layers we feel needs to come from different, need to be diverse and address multiple physiologic systems. So this is kind of the overview of what we're going to talk about today. So we all know aging memory is on a trajectory. We are not cognitively normal one day and not normal the next. There is a transition there. And this is the transition that is our focus in all of my work. The normal memory, this is what we're all experiencing. We forget names, we get a little more confused when multitasking. It takes more time and energy to learn something new as we get older, these kinds of things. We get this tip of the tongue phenomenon, which is extremely annoying. It seems to happen more and more as we get older, but this is all normal. This is not what we're trying to protect against here in our work. All right, this is what we're trying to prevent. Clearly not normal. These symptoms are very different. People feel confused more often than usual. They get lost or turned around more frequently. They repeat themselves more often than usual. People start noticing a difference. Daily function gets impaired, and they just start retracting from their everyday life. So here's, you know, the transition in the middle, and this is more of a subtle gray zone. In our work, our hope is that we can build resilience against moving into the gray zone, or we can build resilience against moving from the gray zone to not normal. So this is the, you know, the domain that we're working with in our participants sometimes. These folks have more trouble remembering appointments and dates. They feel overwhelmed more often. They feel like something's not right, even though others might not notice a change. They might be more irritable or short-fused, more stressed. They feel like mood is not what it used to be. And the way I always describe this, and I apologize if everybody knows this already, but people in the gray zone, they get from point A to point B like all of us. They're working, they're driving, they're going to the grocery store, they get from point A to point B. But the amount of effort that it requires and the stress is much greater than what you and I experience. So here, just to give you one more picture to kind of keep in your mind as we go through this, you know, what we're hoping to do in our work with these multiple layers is maintain some level of stability in cognition. So building resilience and reserve. I have to say too, what our goal is in my work is not, you know, everybody comes to the table with different genes, different exposures in their life, different current situations, comorbidities that may affect cognition. Our goals in all of our work is to meet people where they are. Where are you? What can we do to keep you stable wherever you are? It's not we're not trying to, have some Pollyanna idea that we can maintain everyone at above, at a high functional level. Our goals are really to how to stabilize and build, starting at the position where you are. So I was excited about this. In 2019, the Wall Street Journal published this centerfold spread about what each of us could possibly do to protect brain health and possibly prevent cognitive decline. And so it got a lot of public attention, and we've been studying this for years, but it really hadn't been taken up by the public. So I was just very excited to see this. We got a lot of response. People wanted all of a sudden to know more about what they could do to protect brain health when this came out. Even though we've been studying it for 25 years. So the modifiable risk factors that they mentioned have to do with that they discussed quite a bit: blood pressure control, exercise, cognitive training, diet, sleep, and combination therapies. So I think this really set the stage to open the minds of increase the awareness of the public that maybe we should get involved and take some responsibility. So Lancet Commission came out in 2020 with their report, and this picture on the right, I imagine many of you, especially in this group, have seen this over and over at this point, and you're going to probably see it a lot more until Lancet comes out with another, commission comes out with another report. And I think these modifiable risk factors that are all on the inside of this, inside here in the purple, the blue, and the green are considered the modifiable risks. Those are still under evaluation, and I think the next time we see this, it'll look a little different. So I know there's multiple studies going on right now looking at these risk factors, trying to figure out what is more potent in terms of so we can focus our efforts on where we can get involved. So the Lancet Commission was just kind of, I think, groundbreaking for many of us because their report said that 40% of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed by targeting certain modifiable risk factors. And I mean, if you think about in my field, if you can do anything to modify 40%, that is tremendous. No drug, especially with the current landscape, no drug that we know about will have that kind of a benefit. So we're very excited about this, and it gives us a lot of fuel for our scientific investigations right now. So my focus so far has been in the diet realm, and I've been working with, exercise. I've been working in the exercise domain for over 20 years, trying to see if there is a benefit of aerobic exercise in particular on cognitive function in cognitively normal and impaired older adults. And so in the last 20 years, 30 years now, there's a growing number of randomized controlled trials. When I first started, there was mostly just observational trials. So we've come a long way. We still got a long way to go. So in terms of multi-domain, non-pharmacological intervention, it's not only exercise that's getting attention, but also diet is on the front page frequently about its potential benefits for cognitive function, both for cognitively impaired and normal adults. And then now, in large part due to the Lancet, the World Health Organization, and the FINGER trial, the Finnish group, there's been a big focus now on combination therapies that are testing multi-domain lifestyle interventions. So including diet and exercise and cognitive training and sleep hygiene, et cetera. And a focus for many of these combination therapies is vascular risk management. So there's a few trials now that I know about that have been completed that show a positive signal on cognition. In the FINGER trial, I'm not really going to talk about that today, but please, it's very easy to Google the FINGER trial and you get lots of information. They're highly published and well publicized. So they were just kind of an inspiration to many of us who are doing combination therapies now. So with respect to exercise, our lifestyle habits have changed over the last 60 years. We used to be much more active, both in occupation and in our leisure time, and look around in most of our communities, that's not the case anymore. We know that exercise has, for many, many years, we've known about and studied the beautiful benefits of exercise, regular exercise on the heart, the vessels, the cholesterol levels, comorbidities including type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, obesity, but also on stress and mood. We've known this for years and years. In the last 30 years, our attention has turned to looking at the effects of exercise, no drugs on board, exercise on brain function and brain health, and the protection against Alzheimer's disease. Sorry, not sure why that went that direction. So this is a complicated slide, but the point here is I just wanted to kind of highlight those the functions, the mechanisms for exercise benefits on cognition in these blue boxes here, the blue outline boxes. We know from all of the the work that's cited here that exercise plays a role in neuro repair, oxidative stress, reducing oxidative stress, increasing glucose metabolism, decreasing inflammation, and increasing clearance of pathological cell types in the brain that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. So what do we know about exercise in the brain? Well, as I said, for years, observational studies was the primary evidence available in the literature. So we learned from this work that people who exercise are different than those who don't. It's associated with higher cognitive function. People who exercise have lower risk of decline. There's differences in brain volume and 8 Alzheimer's disease biomarkers, and the gene expression is different for those who exercise versus those who do not. So in randomized clinical trials, which I think most clinical trials, I think they started in about 1990 for exercise. And you can search right now in Reporter on NIH or clinicaltrials.gov, or just do a cruise through PubMed, and you'll see so many exercise trials currently in progress. And for many of us, that's great. We've still got a lot of work. There's so much variability in what the trial designs that people are using, the methods. So we've got a lot of work to try to harmonize our work. But in preliminary evidence, though, we've been seeing positive effects on cognition, brain structure and function, and on AD biomarkers. And here's some work. We've done some work in this area too. This is just one example. I have to say, though, there are a number of trials that do not show benefit. So I think the harmonization issue is really something we need to take a closer look at to see if that might help explain some of the variability. So I'm just wanted to show you the results of a meta-analysis just in people looking at physical activity in people with cognitive impairment. That is, people with mild cognitive impairment. That's that gray zone that we talked about earlier. And you can see that if we line up the studies here, there's 19 studies, 89 of in this particular meta-analysis, 89% of these are randomized controlled trials of over 1,100 people. And you can see that most of it's stacking up, the results are stacking up in favor of exercise for the most part. The effect size is fairly decent for exercise. And if we look at aerobic exercise only, the effect size seems to go up. So if we look at this meta-analysis, and there are many others like it, you can't help but think that there really must be something here that could provide a layer of protection against cognitive decline or continued cognitive decline in the case of mild cognitive impairment. So the first study I'm going to tell you about of ours is one that we developed based on some prior work that we did in our lab, but also it was just where we were at the time in the field. This study was designed in 2016. We had some preliminary results available. So our study design was based on what was the current standard in the field. And the current standard, I always like to give a hats off to Art Kramer at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. He's really someone, I think, who has led harmonization efforts. And my studies in the past, prior to XERT and XERT, were modeled on the design of the exercise design that he had used for many years, since early 1990. So our goal in XERT was a multi-site randomized controlled trial. Our goal was in people with mild cognitive impairment, the gray zone. So we wanted to test the effects of regular is a critical word here, supported is a critical word here. People within the gray zone cannot do this on their own. So it had to be regular support. How is regular supported exercise, how does it affect cognitive trajectory in adults who are expected to decline? Expected to decline, that's important to remember. So here's our trial. We had 300 people, all with mild cognitive impairment. That's always a challenge to recruit people who have executive dysfunction and not quite convinced that they need to be participating in any kind of trial right now. We had 14 sites. The general design was that it was an 18-month trial. In the first 12 months, participants were supervised with their exercise. All participants received supervision by YMCA trainers. The groups were people were randomized into an aerobic or a stretching and balance exercise group. All participants were sedentary coming into the trial, so they had room for improvement. They were supervised for the first 12 months, so that's our primary endpoint for analysis. Then they graduated into unsupervised. Our idea was to test whether this training could be sustained when these individuals are asked to exercise alone afterwards. And I'll have just one comment about that at the end here. It was a true partnership with the YMCAs. It was just a joy working with them. We trained the YMCA trainers on what it's like to live with mild cognitive impairment so they could be better facilitators and better friends to our participants. And as a result, we had excellent retention. And I'll show you that in a minute. But we had multiple outcomes: cognition, blood, brain imaging, sleep. These data are all available now. If anyone is interested in looking, we'd love to share this data. We are finished with this trial. Our adherence is high, and again, attributable to the YMCA trainer relationship, I would assume, and our retention was high as well. And I have this picture in the far bottom corner to just remind me to say that we did this trial during COVID. And so when the YMCAs were shut down, we were still calling our participants. They were exercising on their own at home. The trainers had that kind of an influence on them. And then the trainers would sometimes meet our participants out in the field at parks to continue their exercise. So it was a highly successful implementation experience. So this is what we found. Our main measure was a global cognition composite score, and it's referred to as the 8S-COG. You might be familiar with the 8S-COG. We developed and validated a new version of the 8S-COG that adds more executive function tasks, and that's been published. You can see, I didn't send that particular article around, I don't think, but you can look that up and it'll come up in search. But this is a new composite that we felt had more representation of executive function tasks, which we expected to move with the exercise. So this is what we found. So we had the aerobic training and the stretching, balance, range of motion. These are people with mild cognitive impairment. They should have declined over a 12-month period. By definition, they have the Alzheimer type of mild cognitive impairment, so they should have declined. They did not. There was no group difference and no decline at 12 months. So of course we're thinking, well, maybe this is just a failed trial. We found no change, no effect. Even though these people should have changed, we need some comparison. We need some usual care. So what we did is we went and searched out a usual care comparison. This is post hoc. I want to say that, before I go into this, you might ask, well, why didn't we include a usual care in the excerpt trial? Actually, we did focus groups in the community and asked, would you, if this was our design versus this was our design, and we had over 100 people in our focus groups, and it was 80% of participants said, if you have a usual care, we will not participate. So we decided we worked with NIA, and we decided that we would use a external group for usual care for excerpt, given what the people have told us what their preference would be. So we decided before we even started the study that we would use the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative cohort. This cohort was developed as a natural history cohort so that we can study what the natural trajectory of cognitive impairment will be. So in this analysis, we compared, we had a matching program. We used propensity matching to do a one-to-one matching between ADNI participants and excerpt participants so that they were the same on age, on multiple factors that might impact cognitive status and change over time. So these were one-to-one matching. And what we found was that when we're looking at these 8S-COG scores, worse is always higher, more impairment is higher. What we saw is that with the ADNI group, that's in the red, the usual care, They got worse over the 12 months. Remember, these are matched. They got worse as we would expect with people with mild cognitive impairment. The exert group, the aerobic group, did not. So what about the stretching, balance, range of motion? Well, same effect. The ADNI, again, one-to-one matching, different set of people, one-to-one matching. ADNI group got worse, more impairment over 12 months, as you might expect, natural history. The exert, stretching, balance, range of motion group didn't. So from this study, and I must say before I go on that we have multiple measures. We look at brain imaging, hippocampal volume, clinical dementia rating scale. No matter what we look at, we're seeing the same thing. Exert participants did not decline. When we compare them to a usual care, a group that did not go through the intervention, they did, even when they're matched. So our conclusions, first of all, this is the largest and longest duration trial of supervised exercise in people with MCI to date. The trial results indicate any amount of any supported exercise for 120 to 150 minutes per week for 12 months may offer resilience against cognitive decline in sedentary older adults. They should have declined, they did not. This seems to be a resilience layer that we might be able to offer. And I always have to say that this was done during a pandemic, so people with mild cognitive impairment have life challenges every single day. And so the pandemic gave us another opportunity to see what it might be like to roll something out like this under challenging conditions in a similar way that these mild cognitive impairments individuals deal with every day. So we feel that because we rolled this out during the pandemic, there may be generalization to the other life challenges that these folks endure. So it may be a sustainable layer that we can provide. So that was exercise. Let's talk about multi-domain just for a moment. So multi-domain is nice because you might be able to increase the overall dose, not just exercise, but if we add a little bit of sleep hygiene and a little bit of a change of diet, we add some cognitive social challenge, we can possibly up the dose. It's possible too that 1 + 1 is not equal to, that when you combine exercise and diet, or any one of these, you get a synergistic effect, a bolstering of effect. And what I am particularly interested in now in my work is how do we tailor interventions for individuals? Not everyone can exercise. Not everyone can adhere to one lifestyle intervention, just for whatever reason, life challenges, prior exposures, whatever. So this multi-domain allows us to tailor these interventions to best meet the needs and the challenges that individuals might be experiencing. So the finger trial I referenced a while ago, and that was the one that was complete, a multi-domain trial that was completed in Finland. Highly successful, showed cognitive protection in over 1,200 people from a 2-year multi-domain. So that really set everyone else on fire, saying, oh, wow, maybe we should be looking at this in other countries. So since then, we've developed what's called a worldwide fingers global network. And so all of the colors here, all the blues, are countries currently in progress, conducting a multi-site, finger-like multi-domain lifestyle intervention. The dark blue are the trials that are studies that are currently in progress. And actually this map is old because Latin American fingers should be dark blue now. And here we are. We were invited to participate. We weren't definitely, we didn't want to be left out. So we have one of these multi-domain finger-like studies ongoing in the United States. But this is just such an exciting opportunity to be able to harmonize and share data across all of these countries, which we are doing. Now, we've shared our protocols with Latin American fingers, AU Aero, and Singapore. And so they're all doing something very similar to what we're doing in US Pointer. So just real quickly, Pointer, we have 2,000, our goal was to enroll 2,000 cognitively healthy older adults. 60 to 79 at 5 clinical sites, and they're all at increased risk for cognitive decline. Since we only have 2 years to watch them, we need people who are at risk so we can see signal against decline. And here's our risk criteria for our participants: sedentary, suboptimum diet, not already eating a very healthy diet, suboptimum cardiovascular health, family history of memory problems, and Black, African American, Native American, Pacific Islander, Hispanic get extra risk points so that we can make sure that they are adequately represented in the study. And the interventions, we're testing 2 lifestyle interventions, a self-guided group where participants are able to design their own lifestyle intervention programs that best suit their own needs and schedules, and then a structured group. So this is more of the hefty multi-domain. This is more of our control group. We have learned that messaging is everything if you want to conduct a successful trial. So we believe it's the support provided by the structured group that is the critical element, and the support and the regular contact. This group has much less contact. So to get folks in, we have multi-stage to find them and screen them. We randomize until they are randomized into 1 of 2 groups. They stay with their groups. They're randomized into 1 groups and then assigned to teams, and they stay with those teams for the duration of the 2 years, and it's their social support. They have trained facilitators like lifestyle coaches who are study trained to deliver curriculum at meetings and so forth. So we have just a highly elaborate way to keep our people together, to deliver the intervention. And we really focus on cognitive behavioral theories to produce, to encourage self-efficacy and empower participants to feel like this is their intervention. We're not pushing out, we're not pushing out the intervention. We're asking them to buy into it and adapt it to their own lives so that we get better retention and sustainability, hopefully over time. And we have outcomes assessments every 6 months for 2 years. And just real quick, the only thing to take away from this is the self-guided group. The little spots here on the graph show our contact, either through team meetings or clinic visits. And then here's the structured group. You can see it's quite different, where we roll out each of the domains 4 weeks at a time. And then we have much more contact over time. So it's an elaborate structure that we've put in place to take care of these individuals. And our team is over 250 people on the U.S. Pointer team that either does clinic visits or delivers the intervention. Our outcomes will allow head-to-head comparisons with finger and harmonization with other large ongoing prevention, or large and completed, like A4, which is done led by Harvard, and AHEAD 3-4-5 as well. We have lots of data for current and future analyses. And I just wanted to show you real quick, just to show you that we have enrolled, we are fully enrolled at 2,111 in U.S. Pointer. And we are very happy that we have enrolled an at-risk cohort. And let me just throw out a couple of highlights for me that will show that the richness of this resource that will help us understand the role of multi-domain on resilience. Our participants of color, 30.8%. We have 30% who are not college graduate. Our area deprivation index, we've got some nice variability all the way up into the 60s. So that means we do have people from deprived neighborhoods in the study. We have a lot of memory loss in our participants in terms of their mother, father, and sibling, family memory loss. Our body mass is high. Systolic blood pressure is borderline. We have prediabetes range and A1C. LDL is high. The MIND diet score, which is a screener for diet. These people are not eating great diets to begin with when they come into the study. And they are not, this is the TICS, is a telephone instrument for cognitive screening. These people are not at the top of their game. So we feel that we have enrolled the right cohort to look at how, at what multi-domain might do for protection against cognitive decline. All right, and then finally on this study, we have many different ancillary studies that will add to the richness of this trial. So I encourage you, we will absolutely, we're fully enrolled. We'll finish our the intervention in 2025 in the summer, and would welcome your participation and access to the data and helping us identify new layers of protection against cognitive decline. So the Lancet Commission, if you look on these, I can't see it very well here, but if you look at the purple and the blue, diet is not mentioned at all in here as a protective factor. But the Wall Street Journal did, and we're looking at it, the multi-domain, of course, we're looking at it as a layer of protection. But another way to look at diet is what about nutritional nutrient supplementation? How could that possibly add a layer of protection? So what I'm going to just finish up here by doing is sharing with you the results of our recent Cosmos Mind study. And I did circulate that paper for the group. I circulated 2 papers that are published on this study. But so I'll just take you through the top line results so far. And we were just very fortunate to be able to partner with Dr. Sesso and Dr. Manson at BWH and Harvard to conduct this trial. And I'll tell you more about it here. Our goal was to look at the effects of cocoflavanols as they affect, could they provide a layer of protection against cognitive decline, or can they improve cognition? We know that there's evidence, was evidence in the field that cognitive benefit, for cognitive benefit in older adults using of cocoflavanols in epidemiologic studies and a few short duration controlled trials. And it was really memory and executive function that was shown to possibly benefit the most from cocoflavanols, especially at the higher doses. And then there was a couple of reports showing the potential benefit of regular cocoflavanol supplementation for people with mild cognitive impairment. So this was it was enticing. That definitely indicated that this was a good investment of our time. So the other component of the study was to look at multivitamin mineral to see what benefit it might have. And I'll explain the design in a moment, but we know that micronutrients and minerals have a critically important role in biological processes. We know that deficiency in older adults may increase risk for cognitive decline and dementia, but there's no, at the time, there's no consistent evidence to support cognitive benefit with regular use of individual dietary supplements. And from a meta-analysis, there's only a weak evidence for benefit. And the only trial at the time we started this that had shown, that had been conducted, that was a large randomized controlled trial of multivitamin supplementation on cognition, was one that was the Physician's Health Study 2. And this was the cognitive component was an ancillary to the main trial. It included older male physicians. There was cognitive assessments every year. Cognitive testing began 2.5 years after randomization. These folks are just listing here on the right. They were extremely healthy individuals, I would imagine, as physicians, regular users of healthcare. In this study that included a pretty long follow-up period, there was no cognitive benefit reported. So in our Cosmos Mind study, here's our study design. We partnered with the parent trial led by Howie Sesso and Joanne Manson. Their trial was a 2x2 factorial, simple pragmatic trial of cocoa extract versus and a multivitamin mineral, and we used Centrum Silver there. The cocoa extract had 500 milligrams per day of cocoflavanols, and their goal was to test whether daily supplementation of cocoflavanols could affected cardiovascular endpoints, and whether daily supplementation of multivitamin minerals could affect cancer endpoints. Their exclusions were MI and stroke, and they recruited primarily through national mailings, and they ended up enrolling over 21,000 people. So we were an ancillary. We had a couple of additional exclusions. We only looked at, included people who are over the age of 65, no diagnosis of dementia, and no insulin use for type 2 diabetes. We enrolled about 10% of their sample, representative. We've looked at that. There's really no difference between our demographics, between the ancillary and the primary and the main study. 62, we administered cognitive assessments at baseline and annually over the phone for 3 years. Our aims were to look at whether daily supplementation of cocoa extract versus placebo on a global composite of cognitive function. Our secondary aim was to do the same for multivitamin. So we really were looking at these as separate entities. There was really no evidence for an interaction, but of course we were going to test for that. Tertiary aims were to look at the effects of the supplementation of these on executive function and memory, and then also examine treatment effects on pre-specified subgroups that are more vulnerable to cognitive decline. And I'm going to tell you about one of those in a minute. And then we looked at treatment effects on incident MCI and Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. Here's our cognitive assessment, again, all by telephone. It was a global cognitive function, a global cognitive composite based on all of these tests here. We really wanted to focus on episodic memory and executive function, and then an overall screening measure. So the only point to show you this is just we were intent to treat. Time was treated as a categorical variable. We used linear contrast to estimate the differences from baseline to mean at all three follow-up time points by treatment group. So we looked at cocoa extract versus the matched placebo. We looked at multivitamin versus the matched placebo, and then we looked at the interaction, and then we looked at the subgroups. Our consort diagram is busy here, but the main point is that we successfully enrolled 2262 from the parent trial. When we look at all possible combinations, remember it's a 2x2 factorial. We have equal numbers in the 4 groups, and we're very pleased we did not get selective attrition for any one of the groups. Overall retention was fantastic in year 1. Year 2 was 84%, year 3, 79%, and we had complete data and baseline in all 3 years of follow-up for 77% of our 2262 people. Busy slide again, but just showing you that our mean age was 73. These are the 4 groups, but here's overall. I'm just going to focus here. The race and ethnicity, 11%. So we fell far short of where we would like to be in terms of representation from the American population. And same for education. We had 11% who had high school, only 11% or 12% who had high school or less. But we had no group differences for any of these, no group differences for each of the 4 here for CVD history, diabetes, depression, smoking status, alcohol, baseline chocolate intake, or prior MVM, multivitamin use. This is just to show that all of our cognitive measures were at baseline, no differences. We had a little something here, but this is a forward span of, we're not really concerned given the number of tests. So we're well balanced at baseline in cognitive function. Here's what we found in cocoa extract, no difference. There was no difference over the 3 years between active and placebo. Multivitamin, this is what we found, that the active group outperformed the placebo group. The p-value is 0.007. We look at memory, episodic memory and executive function. We see some same kinds of effects. So we had a separation between active and placebo for memory at p equals 0.04. For executive function at 0.03. So we're seeing similar effects across the board. And not too surprising because these tests are comprised, they do help make up that global composite. And then in our subgroup analyses, we looked at age, whether age, treatment effects differed by age, sex, BMI, baseline cognitive function, cognitive complaints, depressive symptoms, CVD, hypertension, and diabetes. And we saw that for cardiovascular disease, there was a difference. Those with and without baseline self-reported baseline cardiovascular disease responded differently to the multivitamin intervention. So I want to also draw your attention real quick to this baseline cognitive function. It didn't matter whether you were a low or a high performer, you responded the same to the intervention. So I'll return to that in just a moment. So here's the cardiovascular results, kind of split up by no reported prior history and yes reported history. I just want to make the point that, first of all, with no reported history, if we look at this group alone, we still get significant separation between these groups. So it's just the magnitude of effect is greater for people who reported self-reported cardiovascular history at baseline. And this is about 10% of our population. So about less than 200 people reported cardiovascular disease history at baseline. But as you would expect, at baseline, they're performing worse than those without cardiovascular disease. But with intervention, those on the active, they increase their performance, possibly to the level of those without cardiovascular disease, whereas those on the placebo declined over time. I failed to mention earlier that this upward trajectory here, we talk about this in the paper, but we typically see practice effects when we do repeat cognitive testing. So this is always a practice effect. It's the importance, of course, of a placebo-controlled trial so that you can separate practice effects in the 2 groups. So we do see the separation. We saw similar effects for executive function. So people, the common question is, well, what does this mean? What's the clinical significance? And so, there's only so much we can do at this point. We need more data. But so what we wanted to do is just try to estimate what is the savings on cognitive aging? What's the estimated savings? So what we did is we looked at the baseline cognitive composite scores, and we have, a good range because we had people from age 65 to 95. So we could see where you should be by age, where you are by age. We use this information combined with the treatment effect, which was here. When we combine these, what our estimate is that the multivitamin supplementation appears to slow cognitive aging by 60%. It changes your position on this line by 60% or by 1.8 years. And of course, this is just modeling using our existing data, so we do need to extend our assessment outside of this study, but it's a start. And then finally, I wanted to share our results of I mentioned in the abstract that I sent that we've just finished another paper looking at what are the treatment effects on cognitive status, people with cognitive impairment. So cognitive status at each time point was adjudicated by expert panel after the 3-year assessment using standard NIA Alzheimer's Association criteria. So we were identifying people with mild cognitive impairment or probable dementia using this expert panel. We had 65 folks, 65 people at baseline who met this criteria during adjudication. What we saw is a similar potent multivitamin treatment response for these individuals, no difference. And that's consistent with what I showed you a moment ago in the subgroup analysis, that the low performers and the high performers responded the same to the multivitamin, which is, for someone who studies how to prevent Alzheimer's disease, this is very promising information. And then during the 3-year follow-up, there were 110 cases of incident mild cognitive impairment and 14 of incident dementia. So not many cases. And that, it's a short follow-up period. And so we really didn't have enough power to detect MVM multivitamin effects on incidence. However, what we did see that for people who did convert to mild cognitive impairment, that multivitamin mild cognitive impairment adults, their scores, their global cognitive function scores, were higher than those than the mild cognitive impairment adults on the placebo. And these multivitamin MCI participants, they declined less from 1 year to the next. We saw similar trends for dementia. So what's going on? Just real, we differ from PHS2, what's up? We have very different cohort demographics. We have different schedules of cognitive assessments. That PHS2 had no baseline assessment. There was baseline, but it was 2.5 years after the supplementation had begun. Our cognitive assessment was more challenging. Remember, those are all physicians, so maybe they needed a little bit more challenge. And our multivitamin formulation was a little bit different. We both used Simpson Silver, but it had changed a bit. Our multivitamin formulation had 150 to 300% higher for vitamins D and K, and they added lutein and lycopene. And so, what we're just working with now, are we restoring optimal nutrient sufficiency for older adults who are at high risk for insufficient nutrient sufficiency? So we've got a lot of work to do to figure this out, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in another trial. So in summary, for Cosmos Mind, we have new evidence that, I think it's first new evidence that daily multivitamin supplementation for 3 years may benefit cognitive function in older women and men. And it may be more pronounced for people with cardiovascular disease. But daily intake of cocoa extract had no effect. And I think what we're excited about is this is a simple intervention that could be accessible to everyone, especially people who don't have regular access to healthcare, who may not trust healthcare, who don't have funds to cover healthcare. It's just, it could be accessible, it's low cost, and it's safe. And so I really feel like the work needs to be done to make sure that this should be part of the new recommendation going forward to maintain resilience or build resilience against cognitive decline. So I think I just wanted to finish up by returning us to this picture where we are looking at how do we build layers of protection. Again, there's no magic bullet. So our job, my job, I feel my job in the non-pharmacologic realm is to how do we build offer individuals different layers that can be tailored to meet their needs, to hopefully build protection against cognitive decline. And I feel like this approach is important because it could be accessible to all people. Low income, international. We don't have to have access to expensive procedures in a hospital. But I think if you can see, hopefully you can appreciate each one of these layers. It's not a simple implementation. It takes time spent with people to make sure that they are supported in the way they need to be supported to adopt the new layer of protection. So I have many folks to thank. I apologize, but I have 3 acknowledgement slides because I described 3 studies. I have my excerpt team from the Alzheimer's Disease Coordinating Center at the University of California in San Diego. It's just been a fantastic team, and all the YMCAs. I have my US Pointer team with coordinating centers here at Wake Forest, funded by the Alzheimer's Association. 5 wonderful sites and many collaborators. One of my collaborators is right there with you guys at Kate Papp at Brigham and Women's and Harvard. And then also our Cosmos Mind and Cosmos trial. And this is the Cosmos Mind was run out at Wake Forest. But then our wonderful collaborators with Joanne and Howie and Garnet Anderson from the Cancer Research Center in Seattle. So thank you, everyone. And I think I'll stop there.
Laura, thank you for that tour de force. And I think this emphasis on lifestyle, well, the emphasis on lifestyle modifications for aging and brain health, I think are critically important, especially as we look at the demographics of our population as they continue to shift over time. So again, thank you for your presentation. And we do have some questions that have been put into the Q&A. If you have other questions, do continue to add them. I've answered a few of them just along the way, just to kind of streamline a little bit. But I want to start with a first question that asks about the type of exercise, because it was interesting seeing the differences in the aerobic versus, we'll say, non-aerobic exercise in terms of its potential effects. And there was a question about specifically various forms of weight resistance exercises that might or might not have a positive effect on cognitive processes. So just some thoughts about the type of exercise that might matter more in the context of cognition.
So when we started the excerpt study, we were convinced it was the type of exercise was everything. It had to be aerobic, and especially, and the reason we thought that is most of the trials that have been conducted to that point were shorter term trials. They were 6 month, 3-6 month trials. There's only a few 12-month and longer trials at that time. So we were convinced, and the shorter trials say, aerobic was the way to go. I'm not going to really speak to resistance right now. We are including resistance in Pointer for those who care about resistance out there. That is part of our program because it's the whole total body. Taking care of the total body is important. But in excerpt, it was really aerobic versus not. But maintaining the same socialization was really important for us. So the excerpt, they were on the treadmill primarily. We got their heart rate up to 75 to 85% of heart rate reserve. In the stretching, balance, and range of motion, we kept their heart rate around. We tried to get it below 35, but everybody wanted to. They were so out of shape that their heart rate was up higher. So, but we still had good separation. We went into this expecting aerobic to work. We came out of it learning that what matters was the regular. So maybe everyone who found only 6 months, it wasn't enough volume. So if we can extend it out to 12 months, it's the regular building of volume over time that really made a difference. But the other part, I just have to say real quick, you can't disentangle in excerpt socialization. Can't separate that. But for people with mild cognitive impairment, they have to have that anyway. So why do we need to separate that?
Thanks. And kind of connecting with that, obviously the type of exercise strategy, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And there's another question that was posted that relates to this, that gets at the notion of recidivism. So it's one thing to get people to be adhering to these different types of exercises or physical activity or balance or other types of just being active. But what's your sense in terms of the ability for these those in the interventions to persist with the physical activity patterns and exercise patterns that they were prescribed over the course of these trials?
Okay, I'm going to answer that in two ways, one in excerpt and one in pointer. So excerpt, these people are mild cognitive impairment. Here's what we learned. They got a trainer twice a week and they're supposed to exercise twice on their own. What do you think happened? They exercised with the trainer and maybe they would exercise once on their own, maybe. When they graduated to this on your own part for the last 6 months, people had a hard time. But these are people who don't have the executive function, they can't initiate, they can't plan, prioritize. So I just think too often we want to give something to MCI folks and want them to go take care of other stuff. And I think that's unrealistic. For our people with cognitively normal and pointer, the whole idea is that we're training them to be self-sustaining. They are cognitively healthy. And so far, what we're seeing, our adherence is super high right now on the intervention. And so I think we are able to do that, but I think that's the cognitive status that affects whether you can do that on your own.
Thanks. And I think a question that relates to this before we jump to some other questions, as I was listening to you speak, is, are there ways that we can try to identify in more of a clinical care, a primary care setting, identifying those who might be in that gray zone that you had alluded to? It seems like the gray zone is this large constellation of risk factors. But from a more practical, maybe a broader public health context, are there quick ways in a care setting that we can identify those quickly and efficiently that might be in that gray zone, that might be more amenable to interventions as we continue to work in the lifestyle area and other areas too?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? In our clinic, and I think you all do this too at the ADRC in Boston, it really takes a little bit more time because people with mild cognitive impairment, they can fool you. They tell you everything's fine. And what's really important is you have to challenge them to get them out of their comfort zone. And that's when you see the hiccup. And so if we have 10-minute appointments with these individuals, we're not going to find it. And so, I know we're moving to, maybe an iPad little mini test while you're in the waiting room. Maybe that will help us. But really, if you can refer these folks for additional testing, that would really be a big service to these individuals to identify something much earlier than we normally can with a blunt instrument.
Thanks. And then some other questions really revolve around kind of some of the broader, we are, of course, the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, and thinking about some of relaxation methods, napping, mind-body. How have these been integrated or not integrated into some of these interventions thus far? Or do you see an opportunity there?
Yeah, no, we're all about whole body health. And so in excerpt, I think we had our training wheels on in terms of trying to figure out what's going to be best for someone with mild cognitive impairment. We had so many challenges with the mild cognitive impairment, the recruitment, pandemic. It was just, so we really focused on the intervention there. In pointer, we're different. And so they don't have cognitive impairment. So mindfulness is part of our curriculum. So there's a lot about sleep hygiene. So I know we've focused on exercise, diet, cognitive training, and monitoring your cardiovascular risk factors. But we talk a lot about being present, calm, stress management, mood, sleep hygiene. So we're trying to deal in pointer to give people all the tools in their toolbox so that they can sustain a healthier body and therefore brain.
And what do you see as the mechanisms at play? I mean, one theme that came out a lot from your discussion revolved around vascular health. And the different studies have focused in, whether it's the Lancet article, or was it Lancet or BMJ article, or some of the more recent work, it seems like there's still is not, again, kind of getting at this whole screening impact or question also. Is the assumption that it's vascular that's at play here, given if we think about exercise and diet and some of these other concepts? What do we think is the driving mechanism that's underlying our prevention efforts in the lifestyle space?
Yeah, I think cardiovascular is a heavy hitter here, and that's generally the theme. And the reason I say that is, a lot of times when people are doing exercise work, and maybe there's a criticism, are you sure you're getting people with Alzheimer's type mild cognitive impairment? And usually the reaction of people, scientists who are in this field, said, you know what, we're doing our best, But if we get people with mild cognitive impairment, not due to Alzheimer's disease, more due to cardiovascular disease, we have no reason to think that this is not going to work for them. So I know that's one part of it, but I think there's a lot more work now coming out looking at specifically Alzheimer-related pathology and how it responds to exercise as well. So I think it's would be my overstatement to say it's just cardiovascular disease, but it's definitely a heavy hitter.
Yeah. And then one final pivot with a question is, are there, in the context of sleep and thinking about sleep and cognition, because that was listed as one of the key factors to focus upon also, what's the role of sleep aids? So the sleep aids, you know, are there specific sleep aids? You know, so you always hear about like melatonin and some of these other products. Mm-hmm. Has that been linked with either mild cognitive impairment or long-term changes in cognition or dementia at all? And how does sleep really factor into it?
Well, so we can go at that too. Is sleep important for as a layer of protection? Absolutely. I mean, I think most folks here know about the research that's come out in the last 10 years showing the importance of sleep as basically the time when we take out the brain trash. And if we don't have that time where we can clear toxins that clear, you know, the leftovers from the day's work, we do have your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease or cognitive decline simply goes up. So sleep aids, though, I think you know, I think that's maybe out of my ballpark. The only, you know, comment I would have to say is what, you know, I think the one sleep aid that we talk about a lot, we do a lot of talk about how to improve your sleep. Not so much through sleep aids, but more through hygiene. But you know, the Tylenol PMs, they're just in our clinics. We just really try to get folks off the Tylenol PM, our older adults.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation and answering a litany of questions here, Dr. Baker. And again, thank you everyone for your questions that were submitted and for your attention this morning. And again, be on the lookout for our next Osher Center Grand Rounds in about 2 weeks. And otherwise, have a good rest of your day and week. Take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.